Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome again to the Israel Brief, this time in studio in Modi'in with me, Rolene Marks. And as always, we're brought to you in conjunction with these guys, Lay of the Land. And thank you for your wonderful messages about yesterday's report. I went down to cover the return of residents to kibbutz Nir Am. Nir Am is a kibbutz whose story on October the 7th is quite extraordinary. And thank goodness the kibbutz was largely unharmed, even though it is the closest to Gaza. But a very, very emotional time as residents of the kibbutzim that were so horrifically affected by the atrocities of the October the 7th attacks start to return home. It is day 320 since that Black Sabbath, and to date 109 hostages still remain captive in the Gaza Strip. We want them home immediately. They are being held captive for 320 days too long. So let's take a look at the top stories, and of course a lot of discussion and conjecture around the issue of hostage talks. According to Politico magazine, this is a very, very reputable publication in the United States, the hostage negotiations, which would see hopefully a ceasefire and the return of hostages, seem to be teetering on the brink of collapse. Now, Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who was in Israel earlier this week, has confirmed that Prime Minister Netanyahu has accepted the terms of the deal, but that Hamas publicly have not. In fact, Hamas took President Biden to task, saying that he misrepresented their comments. Nevertheless, there is still a lot of discussion around this. We know that teams are headed back to Cairo to try and hammer out a deal. The Prime Minister has said that Israel will not, under any circumstances, leave the very, very crucial and strategic Philadelphia corridors and Netzarim corridor. That's the corridor from the south to the north of the Gaza Strip. Now, negotiators have told the Prime Minister that he must be more flexible, and that his inflexibility basically is undermining the hostage negotiations, something that the Prime Minister has robustly denied. Meanwhile, of course, from hostage families, there has been a lot of criticism leveled against the government for the way that they are handling the hostage negotiations. The Prime Minister, addressing more right-wing groups yesterday, said that Israel's prime goals remain the war goals, and second to that, the release of hostages. And I think that this is not going to fly with the majority of Israelis who want our loved ones, who want the hostages returned home immediately. Meanwhile, funerals for the 6 hostages recovered in Khan Yunis in a tunnel in the Gaza Strip 2 days ago will begin a little later today. And we have heard from their absolutely devastated families who have said that their grandfathers, their fathers did not have to end their lives in such a way. Our thoughts, our prayers, and our most profound love for those families who will lay their loved ones to rest a little later today. Barrages of rockets have continued to be fired from the south of Lebanon by Hezbollah. Hezbollah, another Iranian proxy, into Israeli communities in the north of the country throughout the day. Now, yesterday, about 135 rockets were fired by Hezbollah towards these communities, but earlier today, at least 50 were fired, including towards the town of Katzrin. There were direct hits on homes recorded, and at least one civilian is moderately injured as a result of incoming rocket fire. It's very, very important that we speak about the north because it is increasingly underreported in the mainstream media. There are about 60,000 people or civilians evacuated from northern communities, about 45, including the 12 children who were killed by a rocket attack, have lost their lives or have been killed as a result of rockets. And Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, the IDF spokesperson, said that these rockets fired towards Katsrin were not aimed at military infrastructure. There is no military infrastructure there. It was aimed solely at the civilian population. Meanwhile, the military officials are gathered in the north to discuss the response. It has been reported that over the night, the Israeli Air Force struck weapons depots deep inside Lebanon in Bekaa province during the course of last evening. But we really urge everybody to continue to talk about the north, the widespread devastation that it has done to communities, to farms, to businesses, to natural habitat has been absolutely beyond comprehension. Thousands and thousands and thousands of acres of damaged land in the north of Israel. Today is the International Day for the remembrance of victims of terror, for terror attacks that have occurred around the world. Now, Israel's outgoing ambassador to the United Nations, Gilad Erdan, released a shocking video where he walks through UN headquarters in New York and represented our various terror attacks, victims of various terror attacks, but conspicuously missing are Israeli victims, and more specifically, the victims of the 7th of October. As we know, the attacks on the 7th of October were the worst attacks on the Jewish people since the Holocaust. Over 1,200 people were murdered, raped, mutilated, and tortured. Not just Israelis and not just Jewish, but also Muslims, Christians, Hindus, Buddhists, foreign workers, tourists from various countries, and over 250 taken hostage on that Black Sabbath. Now, we're still waiting for the United Nations General Assembly to formally condemn the atrocities of the 7th of October. I think we're going to be waiting a long time. And we haven't forgotten that we have not heard very much from UNICEF, who repeatedly tweet out all across their social media about Palestinian children, and rightly so. But what about Israeli children who are profoundly traumatized, not to mention the many that are orphaned as a result of the massacres? UN Women, who, since they conducted their investigation into the widespread mass rape and sexual violence committed against Israeli women, including hostages who remain captive and Israeli men, have gone silent. Not a peep from them in months. UNRWA, the United Nations Relief Works Agency, who we know is not only aiding and abetting Hamas by allowing their schools, their hospitals to be used as weapon storage facilities, but have also routinely incited hatred against Israel for generations, and whose staff have been complicit in the atrocities. Not a peep from them. This blatant exclusion of Israel on International Victims of Terrorism Day is an absolute disgrace. It proves once again that the United Nations is growing increasingly irrelevant, feckless, and has been fully captured by those who aid and abet terror regimes from around the world. But you can have it on good authority that even though the United Nations will forget Israeli victims of terror, including the thousands that have been murdered over the decades, we here at the Israel Brief won't forget, not even for a second. And let's end our news updates on a positive note. And you were bowled over by her magnificent voice at Eurovision, where she came fifth. She has the voice of an angel, represented us magnificently on the global stage, winning the hearts and minds of the silent majority. and beating many of her competition. But now the amazing Eden Golan will be reporting for her duty at the IDF on the 19th of September. Eden, we wish you a Giyus Kal, we wish you an easy time of your conscription into the IDF. We are continuously more and more proud of you every single day, and we salute you, Eden, for your talent, for your beauty, for the way that you represent all of us so magnificently, for your pride in your identity, and now going off to defend us. It's time for the audience question. I know yesterday I didn't do one, and I hear it from you guys when I don't do the audience question, and I love how much you love the audience question time. And today's question comes from Selwyn in Toronto, who wants to know, how will Israel mark the first year anniversary since the 7th of October? And Selwyn, that question is so important today, because we are starting very much to talk about how we are going to commemorate this. Well, first of all, it might be 320 days, but for Israelis, we are still back on the 7th of October. We have not moved forward since then. And despite our incredible resilience, we are still profoundly traumatized. But the government will be holding, we don't know how it's going to look yet, a national memorial. We know that for the first year, it will be commemorated on the Gregorian date, the 7th of October, and in the years to follow, it will be held on the Hebrew date, which also very painfully coincides with Simchat Torah, which was meant to be a day of incredible celebration, where we celebrate receiving the Torah, and it turned into a day of profound trauma and mourning. We have heard from at least two of the kibbutzim, Kibbutz Kfar Aza and Kibbutz Be'eri, who were two of the most horrifically affected kibbutzim, that they won't be joining the national commemorations. They will be mourning privately, which we fully understand and respect. They have said, please, the government should not spend the money on a big memorial, but rather put their efforts towards securing the remaining hostages from those kibbutzim. But I think it will be a day of insurmountable sadness for the people of Israel. I know for me, it's non-negotiable. I will be in Israel and probably will take the time to mourn privately with my family. I'm sure many Israelis have an idea of how they want to mourn and commemorate that dark day. But we will continue to keep you updated. So Selwyn, thank you so much for your very, very timeless question. And if anyone else wants to ask a question, please pop it in the comment section below, or be in touch with us via our website. And speaking of the website, you can find it at www.layoftheland.online. Our YouTube channel is right here at the Israel Brief. If you like our content, please consider hitting that red subscribe button and sharing far and wide. We are on Instagram at Rolene_Marks, on Facebook at Lottel Site, and on X at Lay of the Land 5. And hey, I even posted on my LinkedIn, and our community is growing there. So wherever there is social media, I am posting the Israel Brief. So guys, thank you for tuning in. Please take care of yourselves, take care of each other. God bless you all, and see you tomorrow. Bye for now.